Just going to ask the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to just repeat the second half of his question. I know he hadn't got through it, just so I can hear.
Why is this Prime Minister playing politics while 39,000 Australians are stranded overseas and won't be home for Christmas?
The Prime Minister has the floor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And last night I wrote to you, Mr Speaker, and I would table the letter that it's a matter of Hansard anyway, and it's there for all to see. To correct the record with what I said in this House yesterday, Mr Speaker,
members on my left.
The interjection has come from the Leader of the Opposition why I didn't come in here, because I was chairing the National Security Committee of Cabinet, Mr Speaker. Mr Rudd is a very important previous Prime Minister, Mr Speaker. But
the Prime Minister will resume his seat. No, the Prime Minister will resume his seat. No, I've asked you to resume your seat. The level of interjections is unacceptable. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I take that interjection, Mr Speaker. If the Leader of the Opposition wants to have an each-way bet on national security, he can, Mr Speaker, but this Prime Minister never will, and Australians know all about that, Mr Speaker. So, Mr Speaker, I am happy to apologise to Mr Rudd. Mr Speaker, I wasn't aware of that at the occasion. I had been otherwise informed, and I happily correct the record, Mr Speaker. Very happily correct the record to Mr Rudd. Mr Speaker, I am always happy to treat former Prime Ministers with the utmost of respect, and they deserve that respect, Mr Speaker. I was making no reflection on Mr Rudd yesterday at all, Mr Speaker. I was making a reflection on the Deputy Leader of the Opposition who sought to come into this place and attack another former Prime Minister, and Mr Abbott, Mr Speaker, who it turns out was one of more than 95,000 people who received independent exemptions to leave the country, Mr Speaker. And if Mr Rudd indeed wished to leave the country and he sought to make such an application for an exemption, I have no doubt he would be treated with the same independence that former Prime Minister Mr Abbott was treated with by the Border Force Commissioner, and indeed, Mr Speaker, the former and longest-serving Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr Downer. And I'm happy to apologise to Mr Rudd, Mr Speaker, but I tell you what, when it comes to the great things said in defence of Mr Rudd, the Liberal Party cannot compete with those opposite, Mr Speaker. The member for Watson accused him of chaos, lacking temperament and inability to make decisions, Mr Speaker. The member for Gorton accused him of treachery, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, if anyone owes Kevin Rudd
Prime
an
Minister,
apology...
the members on my right, the Minister for Agriculture. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker. While I'd be quite happy to have a debate with the Prime Minister about loyalty to people when in office as Prime Minister, quite happy to, this is not relevant. This is about as relevant as when he stabbed Malcolm Turnbull.
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat. Members on both sides. No, I haven't given you the call. Just going to say I'm going to give the Prime Minister the call now. He certainly was drifting from the question, and I'd invite him to come back to the question or wrap up his answer. The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker. So simply, I mean, the point is obvious, Mr Speaker. If Mr Rudd was to seek an exemption to leave the country, it would seem those on that side of the House would be the first to seek to approve it, Mr Speaker, in the way that they spoke about Mr Rudd when he was even in this chamber standing at this dispatch box as Prime Minister, Mr Speaker. But I understand the Leader of the Opposition's affection for Mr Rudd because he has the Rudd force field around him in the protections that were put in place to keep this Leader of the Opposition in his job. Lucky Albo.
No, just the Prime Minister needs... OK, but can you do it when the microphone's on, the Prime Minister?
I withdraw that last element, Mr.
Thank you. The member for Herbert.